In 1969, The Wild Bunch shocked audiences with its brutal violence and unforgettable outlaws. But time tells a darker story. The cast faced heartbreaking losses, shocking deaths, and personal struggles that few fans ever knew about. Let's take a closer look at the cast, and their story may surprise you. William Holden as Pike Bishop. William Holden was born on April 17, 1918, in O'Fallon, Illinois, United States. At 51 years old, he played Pike Bishop, the aging outlaw leader of the gang in The Wild Bunch. The performance gave the film its dark, emotional weight and turned Holden into the tragic face of a dying era of Western heroes. That haunted look did not appear out of nowhere. Holden grew up moving constantly because of his father's demanding work as a chemist, leaving the young boy restless and often isolated. His mother pushed him toward acting early. When he finally landed his breakthrough in Golden Boy, 1939, he was so overwhelmed that veteran actress Barbara Stanwyck had to guide him through the role. Yet the same nervous newcomer later stunned Hollywood with performances in Sunset Boulevard and the Oscar-winning Stalag 17. Success, however, did not bring peace. Holden married actress Brenda Marshall in 1941, but the marriage slowly turned into one of Hollywood's most painful relationships. While filming projects like The Bridge on the River Kwai, his affairs became industry gossip. One rumor linked him romantically to Audrey Hepburn. Another confirmed relationship involved French actress Capucine, who eventually walked away because of Holden's alcoholism. After 30 years of emotional damage, Holden and Marshall divorced in 1971. Friends said the separation left him deeply lonely, even while he continued appearing in major productions. His greatest battle, however, was not scandal, but addiction. Alcohol followed him everywhere through the 1970s. Even while he was admired for earlier classics like Sunset Boulevard, the drinking worsened. Some reports suggested he quietly suffered from lung problems and declining health, yet he refused to slow down. The end came with shocking cruelty. On November 12, 1981, William Holden died alone in his Santa Monica apartment at 63 years old. While heavily intoxicated, he slipped on a rug, hit his head on a bedside table, and slowly bled to death. Evidence showed he remained conscious for some time, yet no one was there to help him. His body was discovered 4 days later. Following his instructions, he was cremated and his ashes scattered in the Pacific Ocean with no funeral or memorial service. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at around $20 million. Ernest Borgnine as Dutch Engstrom. Ernest Borgnine was born on January 24, 1917 in Hamden, Connecticut, United States. At 52 years old, he played Dutch Engstrom, the fierce and loyal partner of Pike Bishop in The Wild Bunch. His rough charisma helped make the gang believable and intensified the film's brutal atmosphere. The toughness Borgnine showed on screen reflected a difficult childhood. Born Hermes Efron Bornino to Italian immigrant parents, his family struggled with poverty and instability. His parents separated when he was young, and for several years he lived in Italy with his mother before returning to the United States. Adjusting to life between cultures was painful, and he often felt like an outsider. After serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II, he searched for direction and eventually found acting. That unexpected path led him to the emotional drama Marty, 1955, the role that earned him an Academy Award. But Borgnine's personal life was far less stable than his rising career suggested. He married 5 times, and several of those relationships collapsed dramatically. His marriage to actress and singer Ethel Merman became Hollywood legend because it lasted barely weeks before exploding into arguments and separation. Earlier marriages to Rhoda Kemmons and Katie Jurado had also ended painfully. Unlike many stars of his generation, Borgnine managed to stay relatively active despite advancing age. He had once been a heavy smoker, but he quit and pushed himself to remain energetic well into his 90s. Remarkably, he even found new popularity with younger audiences by voicing Mermaid Man in SpongeBob SquarePants. proving his career could evolve across generations despite the physical toll of time. Ernest Borgnine died on July 8, 2012, at 95 years old, from renal failure at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was cremated and honored with a military funeral, reflecting his wartime naval service. At the time of his death, his wealth was estimated at around $15 million, built from more than 6 decades of acting. Robert Ryan as Deke Thornton. Robert Ryan was born on November 11, 1909, in Chicago, Illinois, United States. At 60 years old, he played Deke Thornton, the exhausted former outlaw forced to hunt his old gang in the Wild Bunch. His presence gave the film a bitter emotional edge, portraying a man trapped between loyalty and survival. The toughness in Ryan's eyes came from a childhood filled with quiet tension. Born Robert Bushnell Ryan into a once wealthy real estate family, he watched his father's business slowly collapse during his youth. The financial decline shook the household and forced him to toughen up early. Ryan turned to boxing as a teenager to defend himself in Chicago's rough neighborhoods. That fighting instinct later shaped his screen persona. When Hollywood discovered him, the intensity that first appeared in films like Crossfire and later The Setup made him one of the most convincing hard men in film noir. Behind that intimidating image was a deeply loyal husband facing a private struggle. Ryan married Jessica Cadwallader in 1939, and unlike many Hollywood marriages, theirs lasted for decades. Yet the stability came with a painful secret. Jessica battled severe mental health problems that placed enormous emotional pressure on the family. While Ryan continued appearing in films such as Bad Day at Black Rock, he was often balancing work with the responsibility of protecting and raising their 3 children. Then another cruel blow arrived. Ryan had been a heavy smoker for years, and in 1970 doctors diagnosed him with an aggressive form of cancer. Despite the diagnosis, he refused to stop working and continued acting while his health deteriorated. The illness slowly weakened him, yet he remained determined to finish his projects and support his family. Robert Ryan died on July 11, 1973, in New York City at 63 years old, after a battle with lung cancer. The tragedy was intensified by the fact that his wife, Jessica Cadwallader, had died only 1 year earlier from cancer as well, leaving their children without both parents in a short span of time. At the time of his death, Ryan's net worth was estimated at around $5 million, earned from more than 3 decades of film work. Albert Dekker as Pat Harrigan. Albert Dekker was born on December 20, 1905, in Brooklyn, New York. When he appeared in The Wild Bunch, he was 63 years old, portraying the ruthless railroad tycoon, Pat Harrigan. In a strange twist of fate, the film was released more than a year after his death, making it his final appearance on screen. His journey into acting began in an unexpected place. Dekker originally studied pre-medicine, intending to become a doctor, but he abandoned that path to pursue theater. Within a few years, he was performing on Broadway, eventually moving into Hollywood, where he became known for chilling villain roles in films such as Dr. Cyclops, 1940, and The Killers, 1946. Yet acting was not his only ambition. Few people realize that Dekker also served as a member of the California State Assembly from 1945 to 1947. But behind his professional success, tragedy struck his family. Dekker married Esther Guerini in 1929, and the couple had 3 children. In 1957, disaster hit when their 16-year-old son accidentally shot himself with a rifle at their home. The devastating loss shattered the family and deeply strained the marriage, which eventually ended in divorce in 1964. Still, nothing shocked Hollywood more than the circumstances of Dekker's death. On May 5, 1968, he was found dead in the bathroom of his Hollywood home. His body was bound and hanging by a rope, and strange messages had been written across his skin with lipstick. At first, investigators suspected suicide, but the coroner later ruled that he had died accidentally from autoerotic asphyxiation, making the case one of the most bizarre and disturbing deaths in Hollywood history. Albert Dekker died at 62 years old, and his ashes were placed at the Garden State Crematory in New Jersey. At the time of his death, his estate was estimated to be worth about $1 million. Edmund O'Brien as Freddie Sykes. Edmund O'Brien was born on September 10, 1915, in Brooklyn, New York, United States. At 54 years old, he played Freddie Sykes, the loud, desperate survivor who watches the Wild Bunch fall apart in The Wild Bunch. His performance added tension and dark humor to the film's brutal final act. O'Brien's early life was marked by loss and hardship. Born Eamon Joseph O'Brien to Irish immigrant parents, he lost his father at just 4 years old. The sudden death pushed the family into financial struggle. As a teenager in Brooklyn, he worked small jobs while discovering theater as a possible escape from poverty. Hollywood eventually embraced him for gritty performances in crime films like The Killers and the cult classic DOA. His private life was far less stable. O'Brien first married actress Nancy Kelly in 1941, but the relationship collapsed within a year. Later, he married actress Olga San Juan in 1948, and they had 3 children together. The marriage lasted much longer, but was often strained by the pressures of Hollywood life and O'Brien's declining health. The most devastating chapter came later. In the late 1970s, O'Brien began showing disturbing symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. At first, the family believed it was simple forgetfulness, but the condition worsened rapidly. His daughter later described visiting him in a veterans hospital where he no longer recognized people and sometimes became violently confused. Edmund O'Brien died on May 9, 1985, at 69 years old in Inglewood, California, from complications of Alzheimer's disease. The illness had already erased much of the personality audiences once knew. By the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $3 million, built from decades of film acting, directing, and television appearances. Warren Oates as Lyle Gorch. Warren Oates was born on July 5, 1928, in Depoy, Kentucky, United States. At 41 years old, he played Lyle Gorch, the volatile gunman of the Wild Bunch gang in The Wild Bunch. His explosive presence helped make the film's outlaw group feel unpredictable and dangerous. That intensity had roots in a rough beginning. Oates grew up in a tiny Kentucky town during the shadow of the Great Depression, where survival meant work, not dreams. His father ran a small store, and young Warren learned early that money could disappear overnight. He dropped out of school, joined the U.S. Marines, and spent years drifting before discovering acting. Hollywood first used him as a rough character in westerns, and his raw style later exploded in films like Two-Lane Blacktop and Sam Peckinpah's cult classic Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. But the real chaos lived in his private life. Oates married Roberta Ellis in 1957, and the marriage collapsed almost immediately. His second marriage to Teddy Louise Farmer brought 3 children but also constant fights fueled by alcohol and his wandering lifestyle as an actor moving from set to set. When his marriage ended, he was already living like one of the drifters he portrayed on screen. He later married Judy A. Jones in 1977, hoping to slow down, even as his reputation grew through intense films with Peckinpah. Then his body began collapsing under the same hard living that defined his roles. Years of smoking damaged his lungs and led to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a condition that made breathing increasingly difficult. In early 1982, he was already weakened by severe influenza, yet he refused to rest. The end came with shocking suddenness. On April 3, 1982, Warren Oates died in Los Angeles at 53 years old after suffering a massive heart attack while taking an afternoon nap. Doctors later confirmed his damaged lungs had placed enormous strain on his heart. After a small funeral, he was cremated and his ashes scattered at his ranch in Montana exactly as he wished. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at around $2 million, modest for a man whose raw screen presence helped define some of the most unforgettable films of the 1970s. Ben Jonson as Hector Gorch. Ben Jonson was born on June 13, 1918, in Foraker, Oklahoma, United States. At 51 years old, he played Hector Gorch, the tough, silent brother in the Wild Bunch gang in The Wild Bunch. His natural cowboy presence gave the film an authenticity few actors could imitate. That realism came from a childhood built on dust, horses, and danger. Jonson grew up on a working ranch in Oklahoma where boys learned to ride before they learned to drive. Rodeo competitions and cattle work were part of everyday life, and injuries were common. Hollywood discovered him only because he transported horses to California. What began as stunt work soon turned into acting roles in films like Mighty Joe Young. His marriage told a quieter but deeply emotional story. Jonson married Carol Elaine Jones in 1941, and unlike most Hollywood couples, they stayed together for more than 50 years. Yet their long marriage carried a private sorrow. They were never able to have children. That absence of a family always weighed on him. He often escaped the spotlight by returning to rodeo competitions and ranch life. Years of rodeo riding, stunt work, and physical strain eventually took their toll. Though Jonson remained strong well into his later years, the accumulated stress on his body gradually weakened his heart. He continued working and appearing in films, but the quiet toll of decades of hard living was already building. Ben Jonson died on April 8, 1996, in Mesa, Arizona, at 77 years old after suffering a heart attack. His death marked the passing of one of Hollywood's last authentic cowboy actors. By the time he died, his wealth was estimated at around $4 million, earned through film work, rodeo success, and decades in Western cinema. Emilio Fernandez as General Mapache. Emilio Fernandez was born on March 26, 1904, in Sabinas, Coahuila, Mexico. At 65 years old, he played General Mapache, the sadistic military tyrant who rules the chaos in The Wild Bunch. His brutal screen presence turned the film's violence into something terrifyingly believable. The roots of that intensity trace back to a violent beginning. Fernandez was the son of a Mexican revolutionary general and a Kickapoo indigenous mother, growing up in the middle of armed conflict. As a teenager, he joined revolutionary forces and later the Mexican Military Academy. One failed uprising against the government sent him to prison. He escaped and fled to the United States, surviving as a dock worker, bartender, and construction laborer in Chicago and Los Angeles. While doing those jobs, he slipped into Hollywood as an extra, eventually rising to direct powerful films like Maria Candelaria and The Pearl, works that made him one of the architects of Mexico's golden age of cinema. But the drama in his personal life often eclipsed the films. Fernandez married a Cuban teenager, Gladys Fernandez, when she was just 16. Their marriage collapsed after his obsession with legendary actress Dolores Del Rio became public. Later, he formed a volatile relationship with actress Columba Dominguez, who became pregnant with his child. Fernandez demanded she end the pregnancy. She refused, and the relationship exploded. Years later, tragedy struck when their daughter Jacaranda died after falling from a rooftop in 1978. Then came a final cruel twist. In the late 1970s, Fernandez was imprisoned after shooting and killing a farmer during a dispute, a scandal that stunned Mexico's film world. He was eventually released, but his life was already spiraling. In 1986, he fell in his home in Acapulco and fractured his hip. During treatment, doctors gave him a blood transfusion contaminated with malaria, a catastrophic medical mistake that his weakened body could not survive. Emilio Fernandez died on August 6, 1986, at 82 years old. His death ignited a fierce inheritance battle between his daughter Adela Fernandez and actress Columba Dominguez over his fortress-like home in Coyoacán. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated at around $1 million, small compared to the cultural power he left behind. Strother Martin as Coffer. Strother Martin was born on March 26, 1919, in Kokomo, Indiana, United States. At 50 years old, he played Coffer, the sly bounty hunter who manipulates the hunt in the Wild Bunch. His quiet, calculating presence added a chilling layer of tension to the film. But his path to Hollywood began in a completely different world. Martin grew up in a working-class family where his father was a machinist. As a teenager, he discovered an unusual talent: diving. By 17, he had won the National Junior Springboard Diving Championship, and his skills carried him to the University of Michigan and later to the U.S. Navy during World War II, where he trained sailors as a swimming instructor. Missing a chance to join the 1948 Olympic team shattered that dream. That disappointment pushed him toward California, where small roles slowly grew into memorable performances in Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. His marriage, however, remained quiet but lonely. Martin married Helen Meisels in 1967, and the couple stayed together until his death. They never had children, and friends often said the actor poured all his energy into work instead. While appearing in dozens of westerns and television dramas, Martin lived far from Hollywood's glamorous circles, preferring a quiet life with his wife. Behind that calm surface, serious health problems were building. Martin was battling diabetes and heart disease during the final years of his life. Doctors warned him that stress and long working hours could be dangerous, but the veteran character actor continued working at a relentless pace. The end came suddenly. On August 1st, 1980, Strother Martin died at 61 years old after suffering a massive heart attack shortly after attending a dinner in Beverly Hills. He was rushed to a hospital in Thousand Oaks but could not be saved. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1.5 million, earned from decades of steady film work. L.Q. Jones as T.C. L.Q. Jones was born on August 19, 1927, in Beaumont, Texas. When he appeared in The Wild Bunch, 1969, he was 42 years old, playing the ruthless bounty hunter T.C. His career would eventually span nearly 70 years, with appearances in Western classics like Ride the High Country and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. But before Hollywood ever knew his name, his life had already been marked by tragedy. Jones lost his mother in a car accident when he was still a child, forcing him to grow up largely under the care of relatives. His early life was restless and unpredictable. He briefly played professional football and baseball, and even attempted to run a ranch in Nicaragua before returning to the United States. During this uncertain period, he began appearing in films such as Battle Cry, 1955, which slowly opened the door to a career in acting. However, his personal life proved far less stable than his on-screen characters. Jones married Netta Sue Lewis in 1950, and the couple had 3 children together. But decades of relentless work, especially during the years he frequently collaborated with director Sam Peckinpah on films like Major Dundee and The Wild Bunch, placed heavy strain on the marriage. After nearly 3 decades together, their relationship finally collapsed in a painful divorce in 1979. Eventually, on July 9, 2022, he died peacefully at his home in Hollywood Hills of natural causes. At the time of his death at 94, L.Q. Jones had an estimated net worth of around $2 million. Bo Hopkins as Crazy Lee. Bo Hopkins was born February 2, 1938, in Greenville, South Carolina. When he appeared in The Wild Bunch, 1969, he was just 31 years old, playing the unpredictable outlaw Crazy Lee. The role launched a long Hollywood career that later included films like American Graffiti, 1973, and the hit TV series Dynasty. But the chaos he portrayed on screen was not entirely fictional. Hopkins grew up in a deeply unstable home. His adoptive father died of a heart attack right in front of him when he was still a boy, a moment that left a lasting psychological scar. Soon after, his mother remarried, and Hopkins clashed violently with his new stepfather. By his teenage years, he had run away from home multiple times, committed small crimes, and even spent time in a reform school before eventually joining the U.S. Army. Yet while his career slowly stabilized, his personal life did not. Hopkins married Norma Woodall at just 21 years old, and the couple had a daughter. But the marriage collapsed almost as quickly as it began. When Hopkins decided to chase an acting career in New York and Hollywood, his young wife left him and took their child, leaving him alone and nearly broke. Later in life, Hopkins found stability with his second wife, Cyan Eleanor Green, whom he married in 1989. They remained together for decades and had a son in 1995. But the shadow of his difficult past never completely disappeared, and he spent long periods stepping away from Hollywood to rebuild his life. In May 2022, Bo Hopkins died after suffering a heart attack at his home in Los Angeles. He was 84 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $3 million, earned from more than 4 decades of film and television. Yet his life remains a powerful reminder that behind some of Hollywood's toughest characters were actors who had survived even tougher childhoods. Dub Taylor as Reverend Wainscoat. Dub Taylor was born February 26, 1907, in Richmond, Virginia. When he appeared in The Wild Bunch, 1969, he was 62 years old, playing the eccentric preacher Reverend Wainscoat. By then, he had already built a career spanning decades, later appearing in films like The Getaway, 1972, and Back to the Future Part 3, 1990. But his early life was far from glamorous. Taylor grew up in a large working-class family where money was always scarce. His father was a laborer, and the young Taylor quickly realized that entertainment might be his only escape from poverty. He began performing music and comedy routines, slowly finding work in radio and stage shows before eventually transitioning into film roles like You Can't Take It With You, 1938. Unlike many actors in Hollywood, Taylor's personal life was remarkably stable. In 1931, he married Florence Gertrude Heffernan, and the couple stayed together for more than 50 years. They raised 2 children, including actor Buck Taylor, who later became famous for his role in Gunsmoke. Yet tragedy eventually struck the family when Florence passed away in 1987, a loss that deeply affected Taylor during his final years. Even in his 80s, Taylor continued working in film and television. His warm, comic presence made him a favorite character actor, and he was eventually honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But his health slowly declined as he grew older. On October 3, 1994, Dub Taylor died in Los Angeles from congestive heart failure. He was 87 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, built from a career that lasted more than half a century. Though rarely the leading man, his unforgettable personality made him one of the most beloved character actors in Western cinema. As we've seen, the cast of The Wild Bunch, 1969, brought unforgettable characters to the screen. But many of their real lives ended in tragedy, illness, or shocking circumstances. Decades later, their stories still echo through Hollywood history. Which cast member's story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look at The Wild Bunch 1969 cast then and now 2026, all the cast members died tragically. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more classic film stories and cast updates.